So what? Under edit by Foolish Sociopath. 6.5K 14,312. Advertisements. Third person POV. What is happening? The sub-Earth man thought as he witnessed what was happening before his eyes. His mind was riddled with questions such as, how is this possible? And, no, what is this monster in front of me? Until a couple of minutes back, everything was proceeding just as he had expected. The earth trembled beneath the weight of imminent cataclysm, as molten fury surged forth from the very heart of the land. Volcanoes, once dormant giants, now roared to life with a furious bellow. The skies darkened, shrouding the world in a foreboding cloak of ash and smoke. Rivers of lava cascaded down the slopes, a torrent of liquid fire consuming all in its path. The searing heat seemed to reach out hungrily, scorching the very air and igniting everything it touched. Trees, rocks, and structures were devoured in a relentless embrace of destruction. As the rivers of molten rock surged closer to the Olmec settlements, panic and despair spread like wildfire among the survivors. But while desperation was etched on their faces, they looked towards three beings at the front of the crowd. Specifically, they were looking at the one in the center. Multiple blue circles swirled around in the air, forming a dome while the light they emitted reached into the sky. Semi-translucent markings which looked like it could be words or symbols were etched on the circles. Those semi-translucent markings were rapidly changing, and at any given moment none of the words were the same. The dome of light then suddenly shone brightly before breaking into tiny pieces and vanished into the air. And then, there was no then, everything was frozen. The rivers of hot molten rocks were frozen by forces beyond recognition. The feet of the flame men following the sub-Earth man were frozen as well. After a moment of silence, roars disturbed the silence as the flame men scurried to melt the ice binding their feet. The sub-Earth man was no different, for he too did the same. Panic was inevitable. Until a few moments ago he was assured of his victory. But in a matter of moments the sub-Earth man had traveled from heaven to hell. Oh, but true hell did await him along with the rest of the flame men. A hell that would be their prison and an archdemon, the warden. Of course not all were terrified by the events taking place. The humans had almost worshipful faces due to witnessing the display of divine might. Naturally the two demons also had such expressions. In fact, they had to stop themselves from displaying their growing admiration to keep up with their image. No, my plan cannot be ruined like this. I will kill that monster at the front for stopping me. Nothing can stop me, ha ha ha. The sub-Earth man shouted loudly. It seems the sub-Earth man was not that much smarter than his subordinates. Maybe his subordinates were wiser as they had no fighting spirit left after witnessing the opponent's attack as compared to their incompetent commander. Not to mention his loud shout had caused two demons to look at the sub-Earth man with malicious intentions they were not making any attempt to hide. Oh, may God help this poor soul. Too bad for him. God was going to send him the demon's way without a second thought. Shirori Pav. No, my plan cannot be ruined like this. I will kill that monster at the front for stopping me. Nothing can stop me, ha ha ha. Oh, it seems I broke him. Not that I care anyway. I am getting tired of this little excursion now, so let's speed up. I would have asked Albedo and Demiurge to capture them, but the anger and hatred they were giving out after the flaming man's previous declaration was no joke. Since Demiurge was going to study these flame men, he probably had some plans for them in mind that will benefit Nazarick. I can't let those plans have a setback because of some personal anger. I also did not want to bother with those flaming rocks anymore. So I just summoned some white spiders from my pocket dimension. These were the Horonia. Listen up, brats, capture those flaming rocks as fast you can. I will treat you to a meal if you do well. The eyes of the babies were glowing red after hearing the task and the reward. They immediately charged towards those flame men. It should not be difficult to finish this task for them at all. It seemed Demiurge and Albedo had calmed down after witnessing my move, but I could still see the gleam in Demiurge's eyes that promised retribution to the boss of the molten rocks. May your soul rest in peace. I gave a silent prayer for the acquaintance I barely knew. Demiurge, come and measure how effective the spell was in a couple of days' time. I want to know the exact parameters such as how large the area of effect was. I said. As you command, he immediately responded. We should also be finishing up here. I was able to disguise ourselves from prying eyes such as Heimdall but not what is happening around us. If someone tries to see what's happening, they will only see the creation spell in the frozen lava but not us. Very well, my lady. What should we do with the humans? Albedo knelt on one knee and asked. I looked back towards the humans who were now bowing down with their head touching the ground. Demiurge and Albedo seemed satisfied with this display. Actually, this is pretty good. If they have reverence and awe towards me, my goal of creating a kingdom like Wakanda can be accomplished pretty easily. As I was thinking, the brats arrived with the flaming rocks in tow, looking eagerly towards me. I just transported them to Nazarick before opening my inventory and dropping some of Nazarick's delicious food towards them. As they started munching down on the food I just stroked them calmly, which they rather enjoyed, before raising my hand and using healing magic on the humans. Ooh. Thank you for your mercy and kindness. God is with us. Quote ellipsis. Quote. If they will come under my charge, I am going to make sure they develop to a point greater than Wakanda. Demiurge, when you come to survey the parameters of my spell, you can come to this settlement as well. As we spoke earlier, we will create a hidden kingdom similar to Wakanda in the future. Since Nazarick specializes in magic and you will be studying science, this kingdom can be a testing ground combining the positives of both of them. We can have the Pleiades keep watch later on, but for now, you will be in charge of this. I will make sure to finish this task and create a kingdom more advanced than Wakanda. He declared with confidence in his voice. Perhaps, I was giving too much work to him, but that was a subconscious move after seeing his capabilities in the novel. We have all the time in the world. There is no need to be in a hurry. These brats will stay here for a little while and keep an eye on things I said. The babies looked a little depressed at my declaration. I had already used dimensional witchcraft to isolate this area. Lastly, I turned towards the girl who was staring at me with sparkly anime eyes. I walked towards her and gave her smaller-sized white clothes like mine with magic enchantments imbued to them, which she received with joy. I will help her awaken skills later on and bestow some powers. Since these people seem to think of me as God anyway, I might as well go along with the act and announce her as my chosen leader. This girl will be my apostle from now on. I give you the name Nia, the Spider Priestess. Why did I choose that name? Because I suddenly remembered that girl from Overlord for some reason. I was thinking of maybe giving the name, White Spider, as a parallel for Black Panther, as well, but I'll leave that for now. I can always give such a name later as well. Anyway, I have been outside for a while now. Ignoring the chanting of the Olmecs, I spoke to Albedo and Demiurge. Let's go back to Nazarick. Our work for now is done. 27. Declaration. Marvel, so I'm a supreme being, so what? Under edit by Foolish Sociopath. 6.8K 19,313. Advertisements. As I sat upon the throne of kings thinking about the events that transpired, none of the NPCs below made any noise or even dared to look up towards me. I had gathered almost all the NPCs of Nazarick in the throne room, with a few exceptions like Gargantua, Victim and Pandora's actor, among others. As you can expect, the throne room is quite crowded right now. I don't plan to change my name like Ains did. I don't see any significance in making such a move, nor do I expect the other guild members to appear here. The reason for this meeting is just to make some announcements and start enacting the plans. Taking a look at all the NPCs, I typed. As you might know, I have just taken a first glance at this world called Earth. Albedo will fill you in on what happened later. Albedo, you can also disclose the plans we discussed to the NPCs. Hearing an affirmative response from Albedo, I moved on to the next topic. All the plans we have discussed until now can be set in motion. Pandora's actor has already successfully infiltrated Kamartaj. Albedo, you can oversee the construction of time sanctuaries after Mobius provides information in the next couple of days. As you command, Lady White. Demiurge will also start his research as well as surveying the Olmec settlement. He will also take charge of those flaming rocks that were tossed by Sebas and the Pleiades to somewhere I don't know for safekeeping. I then pulled out some books from my subspace that had an undead or the Guardians on the covers and passed them on to some of the NPCs. That's right, these are the Overlord light novels. I used a 0th tier spell not mentioned in the original series simply called Book Creation to make these. These books contain an alternate version of events that might have happened, somewhat like the parallel universes we discussed. I used a hidden magic spell to view these events and create these books. These books record events of what would have happened if Momonga would have stayed behind instead of me and the Nazarick traveled to a new world, similar to our experience here. I spoke about the light novels to them. Of course I changed some things from how the original series went for convenience, for example, removing the author's name. I also did not mention Momonga's alteration of Albedo's settings to, she is deeply in love with Momonga. I did not want her to start getting any ideas after all. Albedo was as good as they come, when she was devoid of any Yandere tendencies. I also removed any of the misunderstandings such as Momonga not having a clue of what was going on, so that they did not think the supreme beings were incompetent. Even though that was not within the realm of possibility. In the novel, Momonga was depicted to be the enigmatic supreme being the NPCs expected. I know for a fact on observing their behavior for a while that they still think of me as all-powerful even after knowing about the Marvel multiverse. I will tell them explicitly sometime later. Why would you not be there with us in these events? My lady, Cocytus asked. It seemed the NPCs were already vaccinated to the concepts of the multiverse and parallel universes, so they accepted something like this rather easily. In that universe, my situation is similar to the other supreme beings in our universe. I had already passed away and so Momonga stayed behind in Nazarick instead of me out of pity. I lied with a straight face. I did not even originally exist in that universe. As I said earlier, I modified events slightly for my own comfort. I added and discarded anything I felt was necessary. The NPCs' faces darkened at a visible rate and before they could cause an uproar about this, I continued speaking. The reason I am providing you with these books that record the events that happened in that universe is so that you can learn from the mistakes your other selves made in advance and avoid repeating them ever again. In truth, I did not want to go through the hassle of personally correcting these mistakes. If they just go through the books, the mistakes NPCs made such as Shaltyr's carelessness leading to her being brainwashed or Cocytus' defeat can be avoided. Especially Shaltyr's case, there are plenty of people who have mind control abilities much greater than Downfall of Castle and Country in the Marvel multiverse. On a side note, after I distributed world items to the NPCs I also gave them the items Ains did in the original novel. Such as Shaltyr getting Pero Ronchino's encyclopedia, Aura getting Buku Buku Chigama's watch and Demiurge getting Albert's prototype statue. We will convene meetings like this on Mondays at 3 p.m. in the throne room from now on. This meeting is adjourned. After setting the meeting to be held at the Tarot Club standard time, I disappeared from the throne room with a swish and appeared in my room on the 10th floor to avoid the onslaught of overprotective NPCs. Third person POV. Silence engulfed the throne room filled with terrifying heteromorphs and eldritch horrors. The events that had just occurred left the NPCs in surprise. While they wanted to discuss the Supreme One's death in the alternate universe, everyone kept their thoughts to themselves. There was no need to discuss in order to understand that all of them had the same thoughts. No one would dare to blaspheme the Supreme One within the confines of Nazarick by thinking anything sacrilegious. After a few more minutes, Albedo got up, which was immediately followed by the rest of the NPCs. This was obvious as Albedo had the highest position of all the NPCs present as she had been appointed the Guardian Overseer by the Supreme Beings themselves. Demiurge, would you please tell everyone what we discussed earlier? Albedo spoke calmly without turning back. Upon reading through the scriptures known as comics, we realize the foresight in Lady White's plans. The Supreme One is weaving a web to entrap this entire multiverse as we speak. Every action she has taken so far has tactical significance. What are you trying to say, Demiurge? Speak quickly. Aura spoke up. I am getting to that, Aura. Albedo will tell you about what happened today as well as the plans Lady White mentioned. If you connect all these clues Lady White left us to test if we can figure out her intentions and actively try to accomplish them, everything makes sense. Demiurge, stop wasting time and tell us Lady White's intentions quickly. What Demiurge is trying to say is that we have to conquer this multiverse, gather all its treasures, heal Lady White and offer up everything to her. Lady White will be the only true god of this multiverse, as it should be. Any objections? Albedo turned around and spoke seriously along with a hint of murder in her eyes in case someone says otherwise. Of course nothing like this happened. Everyone wholeheartedly agreed with what they just heard. Observing their reaction with satisfaction, Albedo shouted. All hail Lady White. All hail Lady White, all hail the Supreme One. All hail Lady White, all hail the Supreme One. Quote ellipsis. Quote. The chorus of chants filled up the throne room. Advertisements. 28. Information. Marvel, so I'm a supreme being, so what? Under edit by foolish sociopath. 6.5K 12,295. Advertisements. Mobius POV. Mobius walked into the library of the TVA with multiple files in his hand. While he was doing the missions assigned by the TVA and stopping the so-called Nexus events, he was also gathering the information the Supreme Being required. The information was about multiple timelines, events that occurred in the sacred timeline, as well as information about science and technology gathered by the TVA. This was just the latest batch of files he had borrowed. The files borrowed by him earlier had been copied and stored by him, the originals being returned. The other members who had been saved by the Supreme Being along with him were also borrowing and copying these files whenever they got the opportunity. It was weird that such a technologically advanced organization used physical files to record and store information. But that was how it had always been since every TVA member could remember. Technically, this worked in their favor as the holy sanctuary of the Supreme Being was more magically oriented, at least from what he had seen. They were likely used to recording information on paper instead of recording it digitally. If this pattern continued, the TVA was bound to get suspicious. But Mobius did not have a choice. The Supreme Being was awaiting him deliver this information as soon as possible. The best option would have been to convert and save the librarian so that they could obtain this information easily, but the library was one of the most secure places of the TVA. Information was power. This was something the TVA obviously understood very well. After understanding the truth about the TVA and He Who Remains, Mobius now knew exactly why this was so. After all, He Who Remains was a scientist. Anyway, the point was that the library was the most watched place in the TVA and it was not easy to play tricks here. He did not know when the librarian would exit the library either. In fact, he had never even seen the librarian leave the library, making him question if she was really a normal human being she appeared to be. And so, saving the librarian will have to happen much later. The files that were copied were stored by the small spider clones. Mobius had found out that the spider clone attached to his mind could replicate. The same was true for the other saved members as well. These replicated clones could store the files as well as save other TVA members by invading their minds. Upon his inspection, they seemed to have minimum autonomy and would only truly become active if and when the Supreme One cast her gaze on us. Since she was not bothering to do so, Mobius felt that the Supreme One had approved his action of wanting to save the TVA. She probably knew what he was planning on doing before he even left the holy sanctuary of the Supreme Beings. Mobius was overseeing the entire conversion process. One day the TVA would be free of restraints and wholeheartedly worship the Supreme One. He could almost witness this glorious future. For now though, that was a distant fantasy. Caution was required in every move they made. By now, around 70 members had been converted. While that might sound like a sizable number of people, considering the size and scale of the TVA, that was nothing. Adding on the danger of being detected during inspections, the risk of undertaking the conversion process was immense. A single converted member being detected might lead to everything cascading out of control, and all of their hard work until now would go down the drains. Luckily the spider clones had some sort of magic on them that caused them to remain undetected. As expected of the Supreme One. Praise the goddess. Reaching the librarian, Mobius handed over the files. The librarian just gave a dubious stare, but ultimately said nothing. As expected, it seemed that such frequent borrowing of files was starting to cause suspicions, but they were not that serious yet. That would not matter for much longer as his mission was due to end today. He was only worried now, if the Supreme One would be satisfied by the meager amount of information they had collected until now. Turning around, Mobius had already left the library not wanting to waste any more time in order to deliver the results of their hard work. He quickly used the tempad to open a time door and walk through it. Upon entering the jungle where he had been earlier, nostalgia swept over him. Upon looking forward, he could see Hunter B-15 waiting. She quickly walked up to him and handed all the files collected by the saved members to him after the spider clone handed them to her. While the huge cluster of files looked like a sizable amount, it was merely a drop in the bucket compared to all the information recorded in the TVA. The spider clone that Mobius held in his palm used space magic to store all the files. He then looked towards Hunter B-15 and held both palms together with fingers extended and touching. He then used the fingers to mimic pulling threads of fate from one hand to the other, symbolizing the Supreme One's control over their destinies, and said, "May Lady White weave your fate. May the threads of destiny be spun by Lady White," replied Hunter B-15 before opening a time door and leaving the scene. These were just some of the multiple impromptu greetings that the saved members created in order to show their reverence and loyalty to the spider goddess. Mobius also turned around, walked down the familiar path until he reached the point where he had met the servants of the Supreme Being the previous time he had been here. Immediately upon reaching that exact location, a wormhole opened in the air, acting as a gate which led to the land of the Supreme Beings. Before he could walk into this gate, the old butler he had seen when he had come here the previous time walked out of it. "Pardon me, but you do not have the permission to enter. Please hand over the information you have collected and head back. Your immediate mission is concluded for now. Lady White will let you know of any other missions she may want to appoint. In the meantime, you can keep collecting information in case Lady White asks for it again." The old butler spoke in a calm manner. Although Mobius was a bit disappointed, there was nothing he could do. He handed the spider clone which had all the stored files to the butler and watched as it crawled onto his shoulder. Taking one last look, he opened the time door and left the way he had come. Much the same as the butler walked back into the wormhole. Advertisements. 29. In the Sanctuary of Obsession. Marvel, so I'm a supreme being, so what? Under edit by foolish sociopath. 6.5K 23,319. Advertisements. Albedo Pav. Within a room on the 10th floor of Nazarick, Albedo was lying on a bed covered with dolls and plushies of Shirori that she had made herself. Some of them were life-size while others were smaller. Some of them were in her different forms such as the arachne form or her human form. This was the dressing room in Albedo's personal quarters. Lady White had assigned this room to her as her personal space. Everyone was banned from entering this room as she did not want others to see the flag of Ain's Ulgaun representing the supreme beings, desecrated on the ground. The flag that should have been on the wall was replaced by the flag of the one true ruler of Nazarick, Lady White. She had just finished the books titled Overlord, that were given to her by Lady White, while Sebas was making the required preparations to carry out the operation of creating time sanctuaries. Her first thought upon reading the books could be summarized with the word, repulsive. The whole series of events described in the book was repulsive. First and foremost, that traitor was ruling Nazarick. Secondly, Lady White had already passed away in this alternate universe. Her own creator had originally designated her to be slut. This just furled her disgust for him. Luckily, Momonga did one good thing and removed that line so she could remain faithful to Lady White. If not, perhaps she would be running after those human insects. The albedo of that universe did nothing to avenge her beloved and bring her back to life but meekly and subserviently served that skeleton. Such a stain could not be allowed to exist. She would eventually have to find a way to go to that alternate universe and knock some sense into her counterpart. The world their version of Nazarick had traveled to, named the New World, was a significantly low-powered world. Despite this, all of them were flopping around instead of swiftly conquering it. Lady White's plan for this multiverse was a massive undertaking, the likes of which could never be compared to the plans Momonga made for the New World. She also understood that the supreme beings abandoning Nazarick was the norm no matter which alternate universe they were in. That Momonga would likely have abandoned Nazarick there as well, if not for the untimely passing of Lady White. Those faults aside, there were the low-leveled mistakes the other guardians and denizens of Nazarick made. If nothing else happened, such errors might have been committed while carrying out Lady White's plans as well. Sebas fell in love with a lowly human, and for that human, he jeopardized Nazarick's plans. What if he committed such stupid acts while carrying out Lady White's orders in this much more dangerous Marvel multiverse? Cocytus lost the war against those weak lizards. Granted Momonga was a traitor, but he had to go through the trouble of personally correcting Cocytus's stupid mistakes. Albedo would absolutely not allow Lady White's glory to be stained just so she could remind Cocytus of the error in his ways. And lastly, Shaltir. Oh, she had so much to ramble on about that lamprey. She allowed an old and weak woman to brainwash her because of her carelessness and caused Momonga to fight her in person while putting himself in possible danger. While such dangers did not exist, the fact remained that Shaltir had committed the gravest sin as a guardian. If she behaved the same way here and got brainwashed again, Lady White might also endanger herself to battle Shaltir given her merciful and kind temperament. She could not allow Lady White, who was already seriously ill, to endanger herself for the NPC Sake. In that sense, Demiurge was the most satisfactory of all the guardians. No wonder, Lady White showed Demiurge explicit trust and even entrusted him with a ring of Ain's Ulgaun. He had already shown enough exploits to win her trust in that universe. One of those pathetic humans named Brain Ungloss also became slightly stronger and cut off Shaltir's nails. She was definitely gloating about this to Shaltir right after giving her the scolding of her lifetime. Truthfully, she might even want to execute Shaltir, but Lady White would definitely not allow that. Adding on that she had not yet committed such sins, she could let Shaltir off the hook. Hopefully, all the NPCs have read and understood their mistakes or she will have to correct them in person. And at that time, she won't be so kind to them. Lady White's safety was at stake after all. Putting the books aside, Albedo wrapped her hand around a Shirori doll and started breathing heavily. As she thought about the contents of the book, she knew that Shaltir would definitely also be making plans to win Lady White's love. As the book had put it, she was a walking dictionary of fetishes. She had aimed for Momonga in that alternate universe, it's not a stretch that she would be aiming for Lady White over here. She also stated that she had slept with several women, so Lamprey was definitely aiming for her Lady White. She had to accelerate her plans quickly and obtain a ring as well. As she allowed Albedo to guard her in person, Lady White had to have some level of trust in her as well. Despite this, she had not obtained a ring, which indicated that she had some flaw that had prevented Lady White from doing so until now. She would carry out the operation entrusted to her perfectly and ask for a ring as a reward. This would only be step -1 in her plans. She also could not afford to remain the virgin succubus, as she had in that alternate universe anymore. She would be considered ashamed to the word succubus if that were so. Ah, Lady White, do you know how much I have to go against my instincts to keep myself pure for you? You should. Sebas had messaged her. Didn't she tell him already to not disturb her private time unless it was something important? What is it, Sebas? She replied. Pardon my intrusion, but that human, Mobius, has brought the files from the TVA that Lady White requested. Should I bring them to your quarters? Have the files been delivered? In that case, there was no time to waste. She had to excel in this mission. No need for that, Sebas. We will meet in the throne room. She got up and tidied herself, just in case. If she ran into Lady White along the way, she did not want to present herself with an unsightly appearance. She looked towards her own personal sanctuary that took quite a bit of effort to create. She was also in the process of making clothes of all sizes for her future children. As the highest level succubus, conceiving children with the same sex was not an impossibility for her. Albedo replied, trying not to drown in her fantasies about her bright future. Advertisements. 30. Constructing time sanctuaries. Marvel, so I'm a supreme being, so what? Under edit by Foolish Sociopath. 6.3K 14,290. Advertisements. Albedo Pav. It had been quite a bit of time since Albedo had arrived in the throne room and started reviewing all the information that Mobius had delivered. She was disappointed at the pitiful amount of information that had been gathered by Mobius, but then again, she did not have any great expectations for him. This information would just act as a guideline, of course. Once the sanctuaries started being constructed, the timelines would go into disarray and the butterfly effect will immediately take place. The information might as well be rendered useless by that point. Lady White was going to make sure to bless all the forces being dispatched across the timeline so that they could remain undetected unless someone viewed them with their own eyes. Unless they were extremely powerful like the cosmic entities, no one could track back the chaos to them. The sheer scale of the operation made it unsurprising that the logistics involved were immensely complex. For instance, the necessary quantity of forces required to implement the plan itself. Lady White had allowed golems and undead to be used for this purpose. This reduced the difficulty of the task as undead and golems did not require to rest or eat. They were perfect for cheap labor. Golems were used as a common means of transportation. Additionally, golems will never suffer from fatigue or even the ravages of time, and thus, they are treasured as guardians and laborers. However, the process of making golems is rather difficult to perform. Their production takes considerable time, effort, and cost. Even the weakest ones would require a significant amount of gold coins to create. The pre-created golems on the 6th floor would be used for this purpose. But as their quantity was limited, only a few could be allocated to the creation of each sanctuary. That left the undead as the main force for the construction. Undead creation was rather easy. The overlords that guard the Grand Library of Nazarick led by Titus will be in charge of undead creation. The issue here was that they did not have enough dead bodies to revive as undead. As pointed out even in the Overlord light novels, the rules of the New World differed from Yggdrasil. The same was true for the Marvel multiverse. They needed dead bodies as a medium to revive as undead. This much had been confirmed by one of Titus's experiments. While the multiple alien races had not been tested to see if they could be revived as undead, humans could definitely be revived as undead as of the experiments conducted until now. After a discussion with Demiurge, the conclusion that both of them came to was that they should not harvest dead bodies from their own timeline. The limited amount of living beings in this time period was one of the reasons, but there was something more important. It was in their best interest to reduce the chaos in their own timeline as much as possible until other plans were initiated so that they did not lose the element of surprise. As they planned to conquer the multiverse, such a time would definitely arrive. So, Albedo would send the Horonia and Shadow Demons first to those timelines as Lady White ordered and clandestinely harvest dead bodies from these timelines to revive them as undead. As the chaos that would ensue in the multiverse will be immense, such small levels of genocide would likely go unnoticed. Albedo had to review information to select timelines and different points in time that were not only rather safe but would allow for such attacks to take place unnoticed. Ultimately, the Horonia would be brought back to Nazarick after the plan was successfully executed, leaving only the summoned undead and golems stationed at the time sanctuaries. This plan had given Demiurge an even greater idea. Inspired by his other self, Demiurge thought that perhaps acting as Jaldabaoth on an even greater scale had potential. Directing and acting in a self-directed play appealed to him immensely. As Albedo had read the Overlord books, she could also see the merit in the as of yet undefined plan to act as a scourge across the multiverse. Definitely, it was very difficult and would require lots of planning to make it possible. But Albedo and Demiurge could already see glimpses of the required path they had to take to make their vision a reality. Lady White's actions as well as the multiple plans they had thought up after reading the comics were slowly coming together as pieces of a larger puzzle. After reading through the documents, Albedo had already decided on what had to be done. Now she was waiting for Sebas to finish the preparations and to meet up with Demiurge at the pre-planned location. His help would be necessary for the next step. Albedo moved towards the 6th floor of Nazarick. This was the floor they had